And that will enable you to do everything from be more fertile or have great skin to also be more active in your community, right? If you're feeling good. So this is where it all intersects and why it's so, so important. So, next question. Do plants have toxins that destroy the gut? We see this. This is kind of
Mm.
hand in hand with don't eat plants or plants are bad or some of the main questions like how much fiber plants do I eat plants? Oh, but plants have toxins, right? They have toxins and we shouldn't eat them. Not exactly, right? So the correct term is anti-nutrients that are out there, but I mean, and the even more correct terms would be just getting into the nitty-gritty of it, and they're like lectins and oxalates and phthalates. And so maybe you've heard of this, maybe not. So we'll see in the Q&A later and in the comments. But I think many of us more now than ever have heard of anti-nutrients, and it's a big kind of selling point of a lot of the confusion of going, you shouldn't eat these plants because they have anti-nutrients. These anti-nutrients chemically bind to your nutrients. These anti-nutrients have some enzymes that degrade your nutrients and cause you problems, right? So you may find that, but there's important context here because so many of the foods and really all of the foods that have these anti-nutrients are some of the healthiest foods out there for you to be eating. So like what is it, how does this make any sense, right? What is the point here? And so the point is that in many studies, and just, I mean, so many studies out there, but really, it is even just logically putting it as that these anti-nutrients don't stay the same, right? You don't eat oxalate and it stays exactly the same. And you're not just eating the oxalate by itself. You're not buying a bottle of oxalates and going, yum, and let me eat the oxalates. No, the oxalates are in the spinach. The oxalates are in the legume. And so what we do is we usually soak these legumes. We usually cook these foods. The foods in and of itself that we're mixing together have enzymes in it and have a synergistic effect. We also ferment. For thousands of years, we've been fermenting and processing foods in a minimal way that are really, really good for us. And we're finding out more and more that, wow, fermenting and kind of just slightly naturally chemically altering these foods are amazing. And the oxalates and the lectins and all these anti-nutrients don't stay the same.
Mhm. And we kind of call this concept pre-digesting, right? When you're doing things like soaking your legumes or your whole grains, when you are freezing them, even when you are cooking or even pressure cooking, and when you are blending them, you are breaking down some of these carbohydrates or even some of these carbohydrate binding proteins, which is what some of these things are: lectins, oxalates, salicylates. These are types of carbohydrate binding proteins. And so, again, they are denatured or they are broken down in a majority of cases in advance. Some of the foods
Mhm.
that have the highest amount of these compounds, for example, lectin rich foods like kidney beans have a high amount of these certain compounds. Kidney beans, for example, have hemagglutinins. And so
You guys know that, right? Hemagglutinin.
hemagglutinin.
Yeah, you know.
So one raw kidney bean has about 20,000 to 70,000 hemagglutinin units. But when you cook it, it only has 200 to 400. So again, you're drastically decreasing these. And then not only did cooking do that, your stomach acid will further do that. Your digestive enzymes in your saliva, your small intestine from your pancreas are further going to do that. So there's no real data to show. I know there was sensationalism to say, but that's where we ask, show me the data, right? There was sensationalism to say, just cut out lectins, your life will improve, right? Buy these $100 lectin pills and you'll be fine. But there's no data to show that eating more lectins even influences marked inflammatory markers, right? There have been studies, randomized control crossover trials, where they measured C-reactive protein, which is one of the most common inflammatory markers that can be measured. We have three main inflammatory markers we can measure in healthcare: homocysteine, sedimentation rate, C-reactive protein. And in this study that was very well designed, they took two groups of people. And they fed one whole grains and they asked the second group to eat zero grains. The group who ate whole grains reduced their C-reactive protein by 21%. So their inflammatory marker went down when eating these, lectins and phytates and oxalates by 21%. Then, when they switched them over, because again, it was a crossover trial, so they asked them, okay, grain eating group, stop eating grains. We're going to measure again after a few weeks your C reactive protein. When they stopped eating grains, their C reactive protein went back up by 12%. So, not only did they have a marked decrease of their inflammatory markers when eating these compounds, they had a negative deleterious effect when they took them away. Another randomized control trial on legumes had one group who ate 4 servings of legumes every single week. The other group ate none. And then not at the as they measured the markers, the legume consuming group lost more weight despite the fact that they were eating more calories. They lowered their C-reactive protein, again, their inflammatory marker, by 40%. They lowered their blood pressure and they lowered their cholesterol. So not only is there no evidence to that, we're seeing in these very well designed trials, these crossover trials, there is marked decreased inflammation. And inflammation is a hallmark sign of autoimmune disease, either that's present or autoimmune disease to come. And then, we can say just with population data, in the all 5 blue zones, they're heavy consumers of lectins and oxalates and nightshades. And as we, as a society in the US, have consumed fewer and fewer of these compounds, we've had worse and worse health. Because studies show we are consuming, on average, the fewest amount of beans we ever have. About 50 years ago, we were consuming, on average, 8 pounds of beans per capita, per person in the US. Now we're down to 6 pounds of beans, and I wouldn't say that we're any healthier for it. If anything, we're seeing more GI issues, more cancer, more chronic disease. So, are these really the culprits? And is cutting these out really healing one, or is it just a temporary relief in symptoms? Because there's a huge difference in those two.
And just a comment, we're going to get into this a little bit later, but there's many out there, luckily and thankfully, and maybe you've heard it here at The Real Truth About Health, saying eat more beans. Where we come in and where we're a little bit unique and different is that we understand there's some of you who can't. And so that's important. And so, but it's not that you can't because it's the beans' fault. It's that you can't because it's your gut microbiome that needs some help. And with
Mhm.
the right help, then you can eat the beans. That's the important context. So yes, if you remember nothing else, you need eat more beans. That's a great thing to remember. But also know that you maybe come from a long generation of IBS in your great grandma and your grandma and your mom and so on and so forth, and a lot of gut trauma and maybe even emotional trauma and so many other factors. And beans are just not sitting well with you. Again, it's not the beans' fault. It's also not your fault. There's things we can do though to help your
Yeah.
gut, and then you can add the beans back in. It's not to then just demonize the beans or the food in and of itself.
But if you do need some help, definitely incorporate some of these pre-digestion tips. So again, soak things, pressure cook them instead of just cooking them on the stove.